My name is Amani. I'm one of the film programmers at the AC here, and just super excited to be introing this wonderful panel, the Black Identity Through Media panel, TV Today, and we have such a great lineup here. So again, thank you for coming out on Juneteenth. I know there's so much happening, which is amazing on Juneteenth, and you made the time for some awesome conversation and a film later. So we will have this panel, and then we will have a break, and then we will begin the screening of Miss Juneteenth after that. So with that, I'm going to pass it to our amazing co-host and moderator here. This program is presented in collaboration with AAFCA, the African American Critics Association, and with that, I will hand it to our moderator, Gil Robertson, who's the president.
Thank you. So now this is year 4, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we've really covered a lot of ground in that time, and have had some wonderful panelists, but certainly none more illustrious than the group that we have tonight.
Oh, stop.
You know, so we are going to kick things off by, and I guess we'll give you some background for those of you who haven't seen any of the other panels, which can be found on American Cinematheque's YouTube page, as well as on AAFCA's YouTube page. It started off with an idea that I had with regards to Black identity and what that has a different meaning to different people. There are a lot of different conversations around it, depending on where you sit, what your POV is. And so I took it over to the fabulous team at American Cinematheque, and they were like, you know what, you have a point. And at first, actually, we did one for film and TV. So we did it for both award seasons, one for the film season, which of course culminates in March with the Academy Awards, and then of course the TV one, which rides alongside a lot of the Emmy programming that you know is going on around town. But let's bring it up to today. So we have a fabulous panel, starting with Charles Murray, the very gifted producer, writer. Charles?
Yes.
We have the equally talented executive. We have a nice cross-section of professions as I sit here and take in our panelists tonight. We have Fanshin, who is a long-time studio executive, earning a lot of her chops working for Ben Affleck and team. And
Jason Bourne.
No, I know. I was going to get to him.
You didn't need to.
You know, as well as helping to fashion the inclusion initiative with Frances McDermott. And we have Carl Seaton, who is a equally gifted director. Many of you know his work, The Godfather of Harlem, of course,
Snowfall.
Snowfall. It's like
Chicago PD Equalizer.
Yes, among others. I'm like trying to think of Snowfall.
Batwoman.
They film it right around the corner from my house. I'm like having a mind for it. But to start things off today, where would each of you, what grade would you give the industry in terms of accommodating the full scope of Black identity? Fanshin, we'll start with you.
Oh, because you could tell that I had something to say. Yeah, D minus. I mean, I think we're getting there, and there are a lot more opportunities. They are, unfortunately, they came with tragedy and police violence and brutality, but we're getting there. I think there are still a lot of Black experiences that are very much left out. People with disabilities, the LGBTQIA+ community, there's still rampant colorism, even when we're making the decisions. So, yeah, D minus.
Charles?
I would agree with her, D minus. I think that what people keep missing out is that even though a lot of people are getting hired, there's still a ghettoized mentality and where they're placed once they're hired, So if a lot of these shows that are about us, I won't say for us, about us, but about us go away, so do a lot of the people who've been hired.
Carl?
I would give it a performative C.
Okay.
Meaning it looks like a C average, but there really is no grade. It's just because of what happened during the pandemic, we were in the spotlight in a different way that made them, it forced them to look at the systemic things that we deal with on a regular basis. So they started putting things in place using those storylines and implementing diversity and inclusion programs and things like that to give us the impression that the needle is moving, but it's a pendulum that, is swinging back. So like I said, it's performative because it was just enough to let the general public look like there's an attempt so that things can go back to normal.
Which is interesting. The pendulum definitely swings fast because we introduced this program during the pandemic, and I don't know if it was before or shortly after the George Floyd situation, but there was definitely some promise and hope, with that first group of panelists that we had, and it's sort of discouraging to see that we're right back with the pendulum swinging in the wrong direction. But yet there are more shows on the air than ever before, and with technology, streaming, there's more of an opportunity for content about ourselves, our experiences to be told. So, where is this barrier of entry for, diversity amongst storylines and as it relates to Black people?
I hear what you're saying, but I don't look at it just in those terms. When I say it's a D minus, I mean, how many white shows are we getting hired on where our color doesn't matter?
Right.
So, but that's the full spectrum, right? Because we're all in the same business.
Right.
So and I happen to be fortunate enough to say.
One of the few.
Yeah. But even still, when I came off of Sons of Anarchy, which I, at the time, considered the whitest show on television, I had proved my mettle. But what I was offered after that was not from the full spectrum. It was, do you want to do the slave who stole the ship? And I said, I've already done it.
And the same goes for all of it, right? For casting, I had this conversation a lot at Pearl Street with Matt and Ben that the only way we're really going to know that change is happening is if I use the example that so Matt had been looking at doing the RFK, he wants to do a biopic of RFK forever. And I was like, cast Denzel and say nothing about it, because that's the best actor for the job, right? That's one of the best actors we have. And white people have cast that way forever, right? Like white people get to be everything. So I was like, we'll know that true change is happening when we get cast as regular people and not just always the Black Panther or the crazy rich Asian, right? We'll know when we are also just human beings sometimes too.
Charles, how do you move past that? Working on, having the credentials that you have and coming off the success of that was that show and others that you've worked on, only to go into these creative meetings and for them to take you back to, or put you in a box.
How do I get past it?
How do you just live? It's just
I'm an asshole.
one more day of being Black in America.
I watched them well. And what I've learned is sometimes you have to bogart your way through something. Or you have to stand on principle so hard, especially when they want your skill set, that they'll move the needle, when you look at my IMDb, it looks nothing like what an agent or a manager will tell you your career should look like. Because they tell you to find a genre, stay in it. Once you get successful, then you can decide to start to do things outside of it, and I've never done that. You know, I've moved from cop shows to sci-fi shows to cartoons to dramas to motorcycle shows to the show that I'm on now. I mean, you know.
Well, it is called creative space, so.
But and here's the thing. It's not that they do it just to us, they do it to themselves. And the one thing that I think you have to navigate in this business is you have to see how they will victimize their own. And the second that you understand that, you realize that there's a way to not get encumbered with that victimization. So once I saw white cats who were really good writers, or really good directors, not being able to get in the slots, I just kind of went, okay, so that they'll go after that dude, they'll go after me, fine. So let me just keep getting my skill set up. And at a certain point, your skill walks you through a door, but it doesn't keep you in the door, right? And the two jobs that I've had, which stepped me out of the space that we all worry about being stuck in, was because there were black executives on the other side. And I point that out consistently, continually. You know, I wrote a pilot for the Star Wars universe. And that happened because there was a black exec on the other side who told me in 2013 she would call me in 2019, and she did. You know, and so you just have to be very business minded, because all of this stuff, I'm big on like reading our history in this business, not just our history, but the business's history. And so I read about Jewish writers during the 30s and 40s, you know, Native American writers in the 60s. I read about everything. And you see a cycle, right? And so if you're smart enough to have read about the cycle and see it continue, you look for the breaks. And when you look for the breaks, you find ways to like advance your narrative, you know. They're not ready for a writer like who will say, no, I don't want that project, you know, and stop calling me. You know, I look at our business the same way rappers looked at the music business. And when, you know, Master P started, he was selling out of his trunk. Cash Money started, they were selling cassettes. And when the record companies came, they went, not interested. We're good. The only thing that does is make a company come back harder. You know, and you just have to stand your ground. And if you stand your ground, somebody will crack.
I want to speak to that power of no as well. You know, because when you're working, you always want to constantly keep elevating and constantly keep finding bigger projects. So I was offered a pilot, and I was excited, all that. Then I read the script, and there were some things in that pilot that I knew. I said, I can't shoot this, because as a black man, first and foremost, this definitely doesn't align with, you know, what I'm built on, my principles and so forth. So in the meeting with the writer, I said, okay, before I just say emphatically no, let me see if they're open to creative suggestions to get away from some of this content. And they were digging in. And so I had to ultimately just say, no, this is, not only did I say no, I told them why this wasn't working. I didn't just say this sucks or this is trash. There's always a why behind it. You give them a why, like this is why this doesn't work. This is why this setup is going to fail your story, and this isn't even authentic. So after having that conversation with them and realizing that I was hitting a wall, I said I'm going to have to ultimately pass. And they were surprised that I passed, because they just knew nobody passes on a pilot. So, and I said, and because I passed, that caused them to take a second look at this the script or whatever. I mean, they went and did it with someone else, whatever, but that power of no, saying I'm willing to just walk away from this and let you all move on your own devices. is invaluable.
The power of no is very powerful, and I've exercised it a few times. Fanchon, in development spaces, I mean, what's going on there? Because what we constantly hear is that they're still operating from the same playbook.
Yeah, they are still.
They're constantly providing lip service that they're looking for a greater diversity of stories. So what is going on in those meetings that you're having?
So part of it is what Charles said, which is we don't have enough executives that even have our perspective. And so part of the excuse often, or they don't, it's not an excuse, they don't get it. They literally don't get it.
Is it they don't get it or they don't want to get it? I often have
both, absolutely.
With a dear friend who's a director, and every year at Upfront, it's like, well, how many shows feature Latin performers? Every day executives are interacting with people from the Latino community. Either they're in their homes, they're encountering them on the street, to and from work, the grocery store, but yet when it gets time for these shows to be
they still don't know what it's like to live in their skin, right? What we have to do is we have to understand our experiences and we have to understand their experiences to survive. They don't have to understand our experiences. So all they see is the person cleaning their house. It could be anybody. They're not interested in what happens when that person goes home. They're not interested in what life is like for that person. And then you get some well-meaning white folks, who say they want to and say they care. But speaking of saying no, I stopped working at Pearl Street. I started my own production company a year ago, and I'm scrambling to work and to get things done. But it has been the most liberating experience because I get to say yes now. And so many times I was just in a position of having an incredibly talented filmmaker or story that I knew I could help bring to the world. But the hoops that I would have to go to even explain the value of what was there was just frustrating.
Excuse me. And what of the inclusion initiative that you started with McDermott? Where's that at?
Yeah, so it's the Inclusion Rider. I co-authored it with a woman named Stacy Smith, Dr. Stacy Smith at USC Annenberg. She does data analysis. And Kalpana Kodagal, who is the badassest of all badasses. She's a civil rights attorney. And essentially, we brought to Matt and Ben originally this idea of adding a clause to their contract. So every time they go in to negotiate with a studio or a production company, they ask that this clause be added to the contract that is essentially lays out a process for hiring inclusively cast and crew. And y'all know why we had to push that it had to be cast and crew in front of and behind the camera. But Frances McDormand said Inclusion Rider at the Oscars in 2018, and it kind of, in the best of ways made things more visible, but then all of the excuses started to roll in. And it took us a while to pivot and to be able to start to respond to the excuses, to the reasons. One of the biggest ones was, well, you're forcing us to hire inclusively, but there's no Black women cinematographers. And we're like, yes, there are. There's no, how can you push us to hire? Which is why I started my podcast, Sister Brunch, which is about Black women thriving in the industry. So we constantly just would answer back, here's a list of people that you should hire. Here's why, stop making more labs and instead look internally at why you're not doing these hires. We finally got to the place where, if y'all have seen the movie Air, they used the Inclusion Rider. It was the first feature film that we finally used the Inclusion Rider all the way through on. I'm proud of that. I wouldn't have told the story that way, because, it's about a Black man, but instead we don't see him. But it's a perfect example of those times when you have to take what you can get, because you know then if you chip away a little bit at this, you go to the next thing. The best thing to happen for the inclusion writer is that Kalpana Kodagal, this badass civil rights attorney, has been tapped by President Biden for the EEOC to be a commissioner, and he cited the inclusion writer as a seminal legal document. And so that allowed me to go back and be like, look, the White House is vetting this document, you need to use it. So we're using it.
Okay, well, congratulations.
Thank you. And by the way, y'all too can use it too. I'll be passing it over to you after this.
Now, Carl, a conversation that I know that we're currently having with another organization that we work closely with, BAFTA, has to do with the use of non-African American actors in key roles in television and programming and films in the States. And obviously with Snowfall, that show was populated by a few non-American black men who were playing these roles. What was the, did that ever hit the set in any kind of way? And what's your response to this sentiment that that American brothers aren't getting the same type of opportunities?
It never hit the set, and because number one, that actor in question, Damson Idris, is from the UK. Phenomenal actor, phenomenal actor, gifted actor. So his talent was never in question. And what people don't realize is the hoops he went through to get this role. I mean, he was tapped by John Singleton. You know, some people complain about having to, drive from the Valley into Hollywood to audition. He had to fly from the UK several times, stand on people's couches, because John was like, I don't know about casting this brother in this role that is so LA specific. But his talent was undeniable. And it's funny because Damson's from the UK. The one who plays his mom is from the Caribbean islands. So you wouldn't know this about them until they open their mouths in an interview. But when you're watching that content, you have no idea. And if you focus on the work and the authenticity and the work ethic that he brings to it, it's undeniable.
And I have to say, to that point, when we're talking about limitations of Black identity, we're a diaspora. So, right? Yes, dang, so the fact that, I think about Cheryl Lee Ralph, her being Jamaican, and, that finally, I think that just came out, and they talked about it in this last episode, but that's a perfect example of how we are once again set up for us to fight each other, when in reality, we want all of us to win. And we want to tell stories about Black British people and Black Caribbean people and African folks. So that's a pressure that is intentional for us to be mad about that casting.
Yeah, because what I say to people when they say that, no one from the cast is from LA. No one.
Right.
They're from Detroit, they're from Harlem, Texas. No one is from LA, but you would know that because they did their homework, they understood the assignment. But because they know Damson has a thick UK accent, they're like, see. So, and then I hear people say that.
And the argument doesn't work if you're from Detroit.
Exactly. Where's your argument with that? I mean, I tell a lot of actors that have that gripe. It's sometimes it's when you're competing, you have to work. You have to put your work ethic into it. You have to really hone your craft. And these people are craftsmen who spend a lot of time perfecting their craft. And this is who you're going up against. And from my side, I want the best person to do the job because that makes my job a little bit easier.
And then there was a similar feeling among actors when you started to see more and more recording artists, rap stars in particular, move into these spaces. So, I guess eventually things will settle or reset.
But when you say start to move into those spaces, again, this is why I'm saying.
And a lot of that was economics because those people could bring, it was stuff that they could bring the dollars.
Right, but Fred Astaire wasn't an actor.
I was going to say, right.
Gene Kelly wasn't an actor.
Right.
John Wayne was a football player. So it's not, when you say I was having this conversation with a friend last night and she was telling me something about they were arguing about the death of theater. And I was like, they were arguing about the death of theater during the Depression. Instead of getting caught up in these cyclical arguments, you realize that this shit has gone on since the beginning of, who was the biggest star? Al Jolson. He was not an actor, you know? So they're gonna do whatever they can do. You wanna know what the bigger argument is to me? Creative people have to start doing business. Creative people have to stop saying, oh, you know, the business aspect I leave to my reps, right? Because this man made a movie for under $100,000. I made one for $300,000. Ava made one for $50, and then made one for $300. Matt Cherry made one for $110.
It's possible.
It's possible to create the universe that you want, but you have to look outside of what they're marketing to you.
Right.
And
a
you
lot of
have
times
to
those
be
projects
business-minded.
Deeper, more layered, more rich. That's where we don't get stuck in the, you know, in us having to prove ourselves and tap dance to get funding, but we're telling true stories. When you're telling stories independently, you have the freedom. We're talking about Black liberation today. You have the liberation to truly speak your truth when you're doing it that way.
Hollywood Shuffle.
Absolutely.
She's got to have it. Right. Just another girl on the IRT. It's not far removed from us. But what we get caught up in is the grandiosity. The business tricks people in the business just as much as it does the people that they want to come and watch their stuff, right? So when we talk about equality, think about this shit like the Montgomery bus boycott. Don't spend your money. If you give me your money and fuss at me, but you keep giving me your money, I ain't gonna have a moment of conscience. I'm gonna be like, yo.
Right.
You have no incentive to change.
Why?
That's true.
You know, streamers are obviously in the news significantly because they're of the profits that are not being distributed in a way that various professional bodies in the industry feel how they should be. But have streamers have streamers served a purpose, you know, in again opening doorways, creating pathways for diverse stories, and for
Have they? Other than Black Lady sketch show, what's been on HBO that looks like us? And Insecure. And rap shit.
Well, HBO isn't a streamer. HBO isn't a streamer.
It's not?
I mean, it's an institution. That's cable. I think you're talking about Amazon.
It's the first
Netflix,
streamer.
and Apple.
right. A point can be made to both of your sides.
I mean, well, yeah. I mean, HBO has its own lane.
Right. It's a they think of it all the time, right?
I mean, that reminds me of what Hulu's doing with Onyx, right? And in some ways, I'm celebrating it. I'm like, yes, they've got a whole division for us. And yet they do it on purpose because then we get siloed again. Then it's like we have to be ultra Black on those shows. So you go to pitch something at Hulu Onyx, your pitch is very different than what you would pitch to Hulu.
And your budget.
I absolutely, yes.
I want to argue, what is a streamer?
Okay.
Something that existed.
How was
after
HBO Max a
I think
streamer?
it's a timing. It's a timing thing. Max is a streamer, right?
HBO, the Game of Thrones,
right.
the Sopranos, Oz is HBO. That's that Sunday night. Tune in to HBO.
HBO's been making hundreds of millions of dollars a month off of people because they won't turn off HBO for decades. HBO Max dropped, and within a month it had 30 million viewers, subscribers. They were making $600 to $750 million a month. What's the difference?
I mean, to me, it's semantics of it all because, like I said, Max I mean, the streaming world is brand new in the last 10 years, but HBO is an institution. That brand is what allowed them to carry that into those subscribers. That's why they can put those numbers up so quickly, because of the brand that was laid forth from 1997 on.
Define the difference between cable and a streamer.
I was going to say, essentially, they're the same thing. They're just packaged differently. They're called something.
The internet.
Well, the internet, I guess, does play a factor.
That's what the streaming is through via the internet.
I used to watch HBO on the internet.
And then the
Well,
use of apps.
cable is a subscription, and like I said, it may be antiquated, it might be old school, and streaming is today, but HBO was a part of yesterday.
And it's the
So
use
if
of
we call it something new, we can get you twice, is what you're
But
saying.
that's what they did. That's what they did. They called it Max. It's Max now.
No, if I stop calling it cable and I call it streaming, I can come and get some more money out of your pocket.
Well, once again, also with cable, when it airs, but with streaming, you can watch it whenever you want to watch it.
I can watch HBO whenever I want to watch it.
on
I
demand.
pull it
Okay,
out
that's
of my
fair.
pocket right now. And
That's fair. That's fair.
but this is what I'm saying, and I'm not trying to
your
just
point is
be
it's on
argumentative.
purpose. This is on
but I'm
purpose.
saying they get you the same way over and over again.
Yeah. I'm speaking specifically to the brand of HBO,
No, I understand.
which no one has a brand like HBO.
Have you read The Tinderbox? The book that's about the creation of HBO?
No.
It comes from like closed circuit television when you used to go watch Muhammad Ali in fights and stuff like that. And so they were like, hey, if we can get this on some wires and get it to people directly and take away commercials, people will fall in love with it. And that's what they did. Streaming, if we can get this on your phone and take away commercials, you'll think you're getting something brand new. Tide is Clorox, is Gain, is if I just give it a nice shiny thing, you'll think it's different.
Yeah, that's the business model. But don't you think we're falling away from that now? Now that it's been proven that subscription-based streaming model isn't serving us?
It's not serving who? Us?
Well, I mean,
It wasn't serving us in the
I mean,
beginning.
The industry.
No, but here's the thing. Let's say you're right. Let's say now that everybody's going back to AVOD, because that's new, right? It's not a network because you're getting it on the internet, but you're still getting commercials. They got us for billions of dollars before they admitted it. You see what I'm saying? It's like, have y'all heard about Sam's Club and Walmart has been taking out insurance on their employees and like literally hiring like people who were sick and cashing in on this? The corporation is going to get you. The marketing system is going to tell you how to set it up to make it brand new, but they're not doing anything different.
Do y'all talk like this when you're on set? Because I'm trying to figure. I mean, I appreciate it, and I appreciate us being able to speak this way here, and I do often as the only person in the room, right? But how do you continue to work when you talk like that?
Well, that's the unique thing about both of these.
I know about God, but I still sin.
We have powwows. We sit down and talk for hours in a coffee shop.
But like also then when you go to on set or you're going to pitch something or do you speak this way?
I mean, you don't really have a choice.
Right. Because
If you don't, you'll pay for that down the road. So it's best for them to have a strong idea of your voice. And you don't always win these battles. It doesn't always advance you. But if you can look yourself in the mirror, you can face your family and say, you know what, I have agency, I have to protect my agency, because a lot of people out here have big deals and have had great success, but it's a cancer eating from the inside out because of some things that they swallowed or just accepted. So you have to ask yourself that. Like I said, I mean, things happened for me later on in life, so I had to struggle a lot before opportunities came my way. So I understand the value of, number one, opportunity, number two, of agency, where saying yes to something now can cost you. So now I ask myself, what's the cost? So when you realize, can I afford this? If I can't afford it, it's not even a discussion.
What was the thing that got? I mean, you talked about an executive and a black executive, right? So was it the same situation where? Because same thing. Look, I speak my truth, but that's why I have my own company now, because I wasn't right. Like, so what is the thing that we need to do to make sure that it changes? Given everything you're saying, given what the truth is of all of it, what is it that we need to do?
Because you are starting to see more, a greater variety of stories. All you have to do is look at Queen Sugar, look at the recent Chevalier, or even look at the phenomenal movie that Lionsgate released for you, Charles, at the latter part of last year, to see that I guess the door is creaking open.
The Devil, you know?
Yes.
Yeah, but you know what I had to do? I had to get on the phone with Lionsgate and say, tell Stars to give you the other money that you need. Because the guy that's starring in my movie is bringing millions of people to watch your show. You have to talk business.
Right.
Right. Yes. Yes.
To answer your question about what we need to do, we need to communicate with each other more.
True.
Because a lot of people live in silos, and then when they get a little game, they hoard that game and don't want to give it up.
Yep.
And that game can save somebody so much hardship.
We can talk about that in this room too. Some of us need to do better.
Some of us that have opened doors aren't really trying to keep the door open or anything like that. So first of all, as Charles said, learning the business of the business, because it is definitely, number one, it's elusive, and it takes a diligence parallel to your creative craftsmanship. So you have to you have to speak two different languages sometimes, because you got this right brain thing and then you got the left brain thing, but they're both equally important, because if one suffers, it's detrimental to your whole macro of a situation. So first of all, so effectively communicate with each other, mentorship, and then let me just go a little deeper with the mentorship, because a lot of people want people to mentor them, but haven't done the work to be worthy of being mentored. They just want you to hand them everything, and they haven't really stepped up and shown, like, I've done this on my own, I've done this on my own, I'm here and I'm here, I'm here. I just need some game to help figure things out so I can navigate for myself. And a lot of people don't really come to the table with a lot. They have an expectation of you just rolling it all out for them. And then they curse you out when you don't give it to them.
So as we move towards the end of our fourth year discussing Black identity, what can each of us do, and the folks who are in the audience, to create a different environment for Black creative professionals in terms of just who we are and how we're seen on screen? Because we've had for everyone from Cynthia Erivo to Franklin Leonard to a long list of others take part on this panel discussing this very topic, but I'm kind of getting the sense that we're going a little around in circles, where we seem like we know the answer, we know the route, the way out of the mousetrap, but yet we're not finding ourselves close to that door. I don't know if I'm.
No.
So, shit. I think when it comes to Black identity, Black folks just need to unask what they think Black identity is, because it's a variety of things. When I made my first movie, it was about domestic abuse. And a well-known filmmaker pulled me to the side and he said, "Hey man, I really appreciate your movie, but we don't need to be putting it out like that. Your next movie should be about brotherhood and togetherness." So I made my next movie about suicide. And for every Black movie, there's a Black identity.
Absolutely.
Right? So if we lean into the monolithic thinking that others present to us, then how do we win? I I've gotten into bigger arguments with people who want to compliment me by saying something bad about Tyler Perry, and I go, you're not going to do that to me. Because there are people who watch his stuff that enjoy his stuff and love
Speaking
his
of
stuff.
business, I mean, that's a business person.
And so I just think that it comes down to the second you hear yourself saying, well, you know, black folks are, you sound like the other.
And be intentional about choosing different. Like if something comes to you that is the same thing, that there are other shows like, and look, they do it all the time. That doesn't mean we have to. So if someone comes to, I know for me, when I get pitches, especially from us, I'll send it back. Even just a deck. I'll be like, why isn't there one dark-skinned woman on this deck? Any deck I get, I send it back. And I say, go back and think about this and broaden the perspectives, broaden the stories that you're trying to tell. And I won't take something that has already been done to death. We have to push ourselves to tell new stories.
Where do you think we're at in terms of seeing more LGBT, the black LGBT community, which up until Pose was basically invisible?
Up until Pose?
Pose. Yeah.
Pose.
You're going to leave out the great Patrick Ian Polk?
Well, I mean,
In terms of a broad audience, yeah.
But what was there before him in Noah's Ark?
But Noah's Ark, I mean,
who saw hit the commercial? And
But you got to start where you are. See, that's the other problem.
But his point is that when he said Pose, everybody here knew Pose.
Yeah, but that don't
Not
matter.
everybody here knows Noah's Ark.
Patrick's a friend.
That don't. No, I know that, but that don't matter because you got to start where you are. See, that's the problem. We keep thinking like until it gets there, whatever there is. But it's like the little pockets, you know? It's like if I could name you 5 white filmmakers who are right now the cream of the crop. It started off with like little independent films. You gotta make your stand where you are. Issa doing it on YouTube, Lena doing it on YouTube. You know, you find the pockets and you build. Dennis Dortch doing it on Facebook. And those people grew people. Tyler spending his own money to put 10 episodes of a show on local syndicated networks so he could build up a portfolio to go to the people and say, here's why you should finance this. Right. Look, both of my children, my oldest is non-binary, both of them are LGBTQIA. And they find content that I have no idea about, right? And it's showing them that it can be done. And so eventually they're going to start to build their own content and broaden it. And again, we gotta have the executives.
Absolutely. And we, those of us who are cis and straight, also need to support that content. I think, again, if we're always thinking in silos, then we are also always constantly struggling with our own small projects. And we have to also be more open. We have to push ourselves to encourage and then go and spend the money on like Outfest Fusion. Right? Like we have to go do that for one another. We have to be allies in that way, even if it's not our identity. We have to, I mean, that's what they do, is support each other, even if it's not a story they know. We have to do that for each other.
I also think we gotta give each other.
I saw Noah. I was going into Best Buy and I saw Noah in the car, and I yelled his name like he was a rock star.
It's an excellent, absolutely. Yeah, it's an excellent
I also
show.
feel we have to give each other grace for first of all, it starts with personal acceptance because as a people, our identity has been scrutinized and exploited and pulled in so many different directions that we kind of police it ourselves sometimes. So, which creates those silos.
True.
So, giving ourselves grace to, number one, self-acceptance, starting where you are. Because nowadays back in the day, like you have to have a body of work to, get an opportunity. Now, if you do the right project and the right one person sees it, you don't need millions of views. One person sees it, it can totally change everything. So I look at Tubi now. Tubi was at one point in time, it was a stigma on Tubi. It still may be there, but Tubi creates opportunities for filmmakers to put their work out. People can see it, and it gives them an opportunity to hone their craft. So, because your first film rarely is your first film, something that you'll be proud of 5 years or 10 years from now if you keep growing as an artist. But it gives you the opportunity to keep getting up to bat, getting your swings in, and getting on base, getting a base hit, getting a double, getting a home run. So you got to get those opportunities to even get better at doing something like that. And places like Tubi, which some people clown.
But it's about to be in the mix. They have a new initiative headed by Oz.
They're the ones that did that Super Bowl commercial, wasn't it? Was it Tubi that did that amazing Super Bowl commercial?
And what's interesting, that turnaround took a year. Right.
It's a lot faster.
Super quick.
Yeah.
But again, when you start thinking about it, Tubi was born because of Pluto TV that nobody was paying attention to until people started going, here are new places. Here's what the networks and the studios look for. They look for a place where they can take their dead content and make it living again. And when Pluto dropped, you saw all of these syndicated shows that used to live on, Carl back in Chicago, Channel 32, Channel 44, stuff like that.
44, 50.
And then now you can stream it. And they were the ones that said, let's bring commercials into the mix, which made Netflix do it, Amazon do it. Amazon has Freevee now. And so that's what I'm saying. It's like, you don't just, you can't, if you're trying to be in this business, you can't just look at the thing that's presented to you. You got to say, if they're presenting this to me, I need to excavate things that are leading to this thing.
I have to shout out Deshauna Spencer and Quelly TV. Quelly TV is a Black woman-owned distribution company. It's a distribution platform, and Black women in particular have the hardest time, getting funding for these types of platforms. But she has incredible content from the diaspora. Quelly TV, and it's a monthly subscription. Those are the things that we have to support. Those are the things we have to sign up for. Then those are the things that we should put our content on. Go straight to Quelly, especially when there are independent projects.
So should someone make a Deion Sanders move and go and work at go and join up with a Quelly?
Yeah, absolutely.
To force the advertisers and the
yeah, I know Nate Parker and David Oyelowo just announced they've got a new platform.
Musa.
Yes, I wish that they had just gone ahead and worked with Deshauna, because there was. So my thing is, don't reinvent the wheel either, right? Like, if it's there and you have a name, then go support these folks that need that.
But we tend to do that.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Crabs in the bucket. Everybody wants to be number one.
Right.
Which goes back to us finding out our identity and opening ourselves up and humbly saying, okay, I can get this far by myself.
Right.
If I partner with you, we can get that far. If I partner with you, we can get even that far.
Yes.
So I see, it's funny because I see a younger generation having that mentality more so than a lot of people that are older that have been, subjected to certain things like. But but even then, even the young folks with that mentality, sometimes it isn't always perfect. But it takes steps like that, and it takes that partnership to further most causes. I think a lot of it is everybody wants to be number one. Right. Everybody wants to be the biggest. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So
everybody wants to be integrated.
Really?
Okay. So let's talk about segregation and integration. Let's talk about all of the businesses that disappeared upon integration because we were finally being invited. Let's look at all the grocery stores that disappeared, all the doctor's offices, all of the dentist offices. There's a price to pay when you aim at the majority and say that's what makes you worthy.
Right. The challenge is it's capital, though, right? Like that's why
because
you aim there.
Because they want your money.
That's right. That's the challenge.
And I'm not saying I'm not sitting up here saying that I'm a segregationist, but I am saying that when you make the leap, you have to make sure that you understand why you're doing it. And you have to know that when you spend your money on the other side, they're not going to just be nice because you're giving them your dough. So you have to take care of your money. Fuck putting it in the bank. You got to understand how your money benefits you and them.
So we should mention places like Spring Hill. We should mention that with Kevin Hart, like we're finally, that I have a lot of hope, when we talk about the D-, that's in terms of like the studios, et cetera. But we own our companies, and you can see it in the content that's being, even Charles King with Macro. We're starting to see what happens when we are in those positions of power and when we have the resources as well. What it was before was like we could get there, but we didn't have the resources. Now, folks with money, athletes with a lot of money have their own production companies, and I have a lot of hope in that for sure.
You just got to make sure you're looking at who reps them.
Absolutely.
Good point. Now that we've seen the leadership ranks at the very top of at least two very large television entities be led by women of color, have you seen any type of residual effect or is it maybe too soon?
Well, I say the Woman King got done because of Nicole Brown. That happened because a Black woman was at the head of a small studio, but it's under and up. But yeah, that's amazing.
You were talking about network?
Network. I'm sorry, that's right. This is TV. Sorry, but yeah, no, it's true.
No, but I mean, Nicole Brown,
Alana Mayo.
Thank you.
Alana?
Who's running Orion right now. Perlina.
Yes.
Of course.
Yes.
Channing.
Yes.
Hell, let's throw in Bella Bajari. But again, you have to take into account that there's a P&L that they have to,
Without a doubt.
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So let's just say these sports figures that you're talking about decide to do a collective where they put hundreds of millions together and say, this is not going to happen overnight. This is going to take time because, how long has Warner Brothers been around? 100 years. How long has Fox been around? 100 years, New Line, a lot of people don't know this, but New Line, Bob Shea had a phone in an office. And his first movies that he was buying were like movies to play on college campuses. You have to strategize, and you have to, you can take a stand when you're a part of a company, but if the rest of the people you're taking a stand against have their own ideas, hell, one is a success because you're not going to get five,
No, nothing happens overnight, and certainly the fact that you have these brilliant women who are women of color, Black women who are leading these companies, I think is very significant, and I think will eventually yield something that that speaks to what we're all talking about.
Yeah, definitely.
right? But Nicole, if we're being honest, I'm saying goodbye to my career right now. If we're being honest,
Hold up. Wait.
no, seriously.
I'm
but
not
if we're
saying
being
what he's saying.
if we're being honest, it kind of has to go to the flow of how Tom Rothman feels.
Of course.
Without a doubt.
You know what I'm saying?
Still, I mean, to your point is we have to build. So, right? I mean, we are not where we want to be, but it's huge.
It's not real independence until we control
Absolutely.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
and listen, Channing, I absolutely adore Channing Dungey, and I think Nicole is like one of the smartest women I've ever met. But when we have these, I'm just saying, when we have these conversations, we can talk about their greatness, but if we don't talk about what they're up against, we sometimes end up faulting them.
Absolutely.
And we shouldn't.
And speaking of that, when we know they have work out there in the world, we need to go see it. And we need to not argue, like with Woman King, you know, the critique was right. Like even, you know, in the Black community, African community, we had critique, but also what it took to get that movie made, we need to just go support it.
Right.
And Alana's got one that I think was just at Sundance. I think that's going to be released. So, we need to keep track of what's happening, keep track of them in the trades, know what their projects are, and go support.
We're going to open it up for a few questions. Do you want to take it away?
So yeah, do we have any questions from the audience? Feel free to come over here. Do we have any here? Yeah, you should.
Yeah.
Can you step forward?
You can come on forward. Yes, if you have a question.
Ask, is anybody going to have a deal at the end of this? Because I see people saying their deals are being.
That's a great question.
Writer's strike.
Because of the strike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, because of the force majeure thing? They did that in 2007, 2008. They'll use the strike as house cleaning, you know, and then the person will lose a deal at one place and go someplace else and get a deal. So, there'll still be overalls.
A way of working itself out.
Yeah, the machine won't stop. It may be on a pause right now, but it's just refining itself so that when these strikes, subside, it's going to get back to business as usual. And as Charles said, you may lose a deal here, but I've been talking to somebody during the strike so that when my deal lapses, I'm going to go right over here. And they're going to be waiting for me with open arms over there and so forth. But the thing about the strikes are, as usual, if folks in the industry get a cold, black folks get the flu. So we catch the brunt of that.
Yes.
So, the concern would be how far diversity and inclusion continues after this. Is it going to be pushed to the back? Is it going to be, quietly erased? Because I see a lot of diversity and inclusion officers being let go from their
Absolutely.
positions.
And it's always the black ones and people of color that get, and yeah. Shouldn't get started. Yes. Do all you can to prepare for when things come back with those rich, beautiful, complex, layered, stories that are different than what we're seeing now. Do that. Do a lot of reading. Do a lot of meeting filmmakers, meeting storytellers. Go talk to people, build community during this time so that you're ready when things come back.
Right here.
I just wanted to ask, is there a place we can go? I want to listen to her podcast too, where we know what kind of movies we can support. Not kind, but where are they? I mean, sometimes they're gone by the time I find out.
Right.
Where to find out about
Well, you can follow AAFCA on
Yes.
at AAFCA on Instagram and the AAFCA on Twitter. Usually when there's a new movie coming out, if the studio's doing their job, we're usually folded into that time of release strategy.
That's
And
a perfect
so,
place.
Either via a roundtable or a podcast, the AAFCA podcast, we're somehow usually in the mix. At least with studios that are willing to assign a budget to these films, because we don't work for free, y'all. So the studios have to be willing to invest in order to get the type of attention and support that these projects usually deserve.
And it's worth it to read the trades and know, if you know those names, just, go through it, skim it until you find the names of the people that you want to follow and support.
I just wanted to add that I'm a big believer if there's no people of color, especially my color, I don't go. And
Right.
like I said, I don't care what the movie's like. If I fall asleep in the movie, I'm going to pay for it to support
Yes.
the artists.
Yes.
I think we we have time for like 2 more questions. Any other questions? Yes.
I just wanted to take this back to television.
Thank you.
I come from the era of 3 channels. Remember those? Broadcast TV? And now we are in the era of literally hundreds of channels, specifically on television, not talking about streaming. All 3 of you have worked on projects that were both mainstream and specifically Black stories. Where do you feel the onus is now, the back end of the pandemic, in terms of telling our stories specifically, telling Black stories with Black characters versus, Charles, specifically to you, when you were talking about, you went and deliberately made a movie about domestic violence, a human issue. You made a movie about suicide, a human issue. So telling our stories versus telling the human experience stories, and where we need to focus our attention now.
Aren't they one and the same?
Yes.
No, in terms of, telling the Black story specifically, and networks feeling that they have to see stories that are about Black people, supposedly Black issues, right? But that is exactly the point of, can you put Denzel in a story about just the human experience? But stories where the networks feel that it needs to be a Black story, Black experience, Black neighborhood, that kind of stuff, versus a story that is.
So how do we convince a network
It's
that
not
wants to
Black actors. It's not
tell a
Black
story
actors.
about AIDS or about homelessness with a Black face in front of it,
But it's
make it just
that's
as relevant?
not the central issue.
Right.
Right.
So you're not casting a Black character.
Right.
You're casting
Right.
an actor.
Right.
You're not, those specific issues versus now that we have so many.
I mean, you work it in development. That's the thing is like, I think with the inclusion writer in particular, people thought it was, once you start hiring, for set roles or for, the inclusion writer is used from the minute you have the seedling of the idea, we want to get to you and start talking to you about how you're actually even developing the story that you want to tell. And then into casting after that. But even prior to that, it's like, okay, this is a story. And the truth is, there are some things about the Black experience that I know if I'm watching it, there was a movie, it was a David Oyelowo movie. He was married to a white woman. She had gotten in a car crash and passed away. And she was in Maine. And so he went to be with her mother in Maine. And he went for a walk in the woods by himself. I was like, I don't know about that. And is he going to be okay? So even though on one hand it was this human story, we also have the truth of our experiences that I may not feel is completely authentic, but that's what the development process, I think there is not enough attention paid to that piece of the creation process where you're really looking at how do we tell this human story and then make sure that it is populated in cast and crew by what the world actually looks like. Development.
I mean, I think what Eminence's show was a great attempt, and I know season 2 is
Reasonable Doubt.
is coming back to show her, and also with Carrie's show with
Unprisoned.
the one with the ABC.
Scandal.
Of showing you these Black characters who are sort of every woman, but at the same time, the storylines, the way it's been written, the way it's being portrayed, is undeniably there's a Blackness to it.
Well, that's as a storyteller, it's nuance,
Right.
and we've all seen African American films that have rich nuance. We've seen African American films that have zero nuance. But it starts with the nuance. Well, first of all, it starts as a storyteller.
Stories that have a universal appeal.
Well, I mean, yeah.
What you're saying is really, both of you are saying is really important is the human, Scandal's a perfect example of, she just happened to be a Black character.
Right.
But in the storytelling, there were absolute things that were nuanced
That we're not about, yeah.
that were specifically about her being a Black woman.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
In terms of she might make a comment or
Right.
The way
Even I think about like that finally they started showing Black women wearing a shower cap. You know what I mean? Like, yes. Otherwise I would not believe it, right?
that are specific to the Black experience,
but she's still a human, really handling these challenging human universal, issues.
The reason I wanted to talk about specifically television in this sense is, especially with streaming and online and independent films and all of that, that with television there is still a part of TV. There are a few channels, obviously, where this is absolutely not true, but where they're still trying to appeal to a mass audience. And from broadcast TV, when it was just 3 channels, to now when there are hundreds of them, there's still a part of sharing the human experience with nuances where it's so important in America to know the Native American experience, the Asian American experience, blah, blah, blah. All of that as part of our human American.
And you're also speaking to the craft of a filmmaker as well. I mean, that's a part of your craft. Your research, we're like detectives because we have to mine the story and find these moments that not necessarily are on the page, but are between the words to help make it 3-dimensional. And your main goal as a storyteller is to get the audience to connect with your content. Right. And that is a big part of it.
And I'll say on your point around being a business person, and you have to understand when you go to pitch, you have to understand that you have to talk about numbers, you have to talk about your expectation for ROI, and at the same time they lie about who is going to go see the work. So you also have to take some of that with a grain of salt, because if not, then we wouldn't ever, like Nina Yang Bon Jovi, she had a relationship with people in China, so she knew that when the industry was saying that's not going to do well in China, she could push back on that. But the one of the challenges is that when you do pitch something that's nuanced and layered, they come back with nobody's going to watch that. And sometimes it's true, and sometimes it's not true.
And I think that's because there's an idea that exists that middle America, which is what they always point to, these white Christian conservative people in the Midwest are somehow not going to be able to find appreciation,
right,
with the story that
right,
stars Eminazzi, or that stars Carrie, or that stars Omar Epps. When we have examples now where we can point to that
yes,
clearly demonstrate that it's not true.
Aren't the audiences, the majority of the audiences for Insecure in Atlanta, I heard, are actually white people?
Well, that's what I don't believe that.
Yeah, that's right, the data.
I saw those stats. Get different stats for almost anything you want.
Yeah, exactly. Well, right, exactly. So,
she's right. That's why Englewood was starting to look like.
That's how it. True.
That too. So, we're gonna. Any final remarks? You guys were terrific. I know we were kind of in a lot of different places, but I guess this is why we're gonna have to come back for year 5.
I want to say something, which is, speaking of amazing, nuanced, layered stories, I'm on my way after this to a play called Blue by a playwright named June Carroll. It takes place in an interrogation room, so it's a tiny room. I think it seats like 20 people, and it's between a black woman and investigator. She's a police officer, but she's investigating her husband's partner, a white man. It's intense. It's incredibly powerful. They're doing a Black Affinity Night. So another thing is, go see theater. When we have theater out here, we need to go support that too. But they're doing a Black Affinity Night on June 24th. And the last time I went to see the play, it was a Black Affinity Night, and it was just incredible. I hadn't experienced that, where we were, everyone in the room was coming from the Black gaze and the Black perspective. So go see that play. It's at the Rogue Machine Theater, and support Black theater too.
I just want to say to all the creators out there that, you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable, and just know that it's going to always be a fight. It's never not a fight. You could be working on your first episode of television, your 40th episode of television, your 100th episode of television, your first film, your 5th film, your 10th film. It will always be a fight. And it's a fight that you're going to always have to have, because you have to protect the story, the nuance, the integrity of the story you're trying to tell. It's always going to be the case. So to arm yourself. You want to educate yourself as much as possible, speak to other filmmakers as much as possible, learn as much as possible. We're in a day and age where you don't even need to go to film school anymore. You can literally educate yourself from YouTube, Google, and things like that. TikTok almost you can educate yourself off of. So the knowledge is out there. There are people out there that are constantly sharing. If you're looking for mentors, I mean, you can parallel mentor someone. You can find somebody that you admire, find a podcast they've interviewed. For example, Charles did a podcast a couple weeks ago called Let's Shoot with Pete Chapman. It is an amazing episode. First of all, it's an amazing podcast because there's a bunch of different filmmakers constantly telling you not just what they do, how they learned to do it, where they came from, their rise and everything like that. It's very informative, and it gives you perspective and insight that you can't get from a book, you can't get from a lecture class, and it's free. It's literally on your phone right now. So seek out the education, enlighten yourself, prepare yourself, be comfortable being uncomfortable, and just be prepared to fight. And just know that our stories still need to be told, and there's a huge, huge audience for our stories, not just here in America. There's a whole continent of folks dying to see more of us in different ways.
Charles, final word to you, sir.
Take the word easy out of your vocabulary and keep it moving.
And with that said, the church says amen.
Thank you.
On behalf of American Cinematheque and the African American Film Critics Association, thanks you guys for coming out tonight.